dómsmálum ekki bundnar við Ísland. Í síðustu viku barust fréttir frá Bretlandi af dómum yfir 20 karlmönnum sem höfðu nauðgað unglingsstúlkum margra ára skeið. Réttarhöldin stóð yfir mánuðum saman án þess að fjölmiðlar greindu frá þeim. Þó voru þeir viðstaddir öll réttarhöldin. Ástæðan var sú að dómari setti bann á fréttaflutning þar til dómarlegi fyrir. Ekki nóg með það, heldur bannaðan einnig að greint yrði frá banninu við því að fjalla það sem framkæmi í réttarhöldunum.
Brynjólfur Þór Guðmundsson tók saman. Oslo, höfuðborg Noregs, verður græn borg á næsta ári. framkvæmdastjórn Evrópusambandsins hefur útnefnt hana umhverfisvæna borg Evrópu 2019. Á sama tíma og Osló verður græn Noregur olíuútflutningsríki. Ásrún Brynja Ingvarsdóttir.
Í hugljúfu kynningarmyndbandi hina grænu Osló á vefsíðu umhverfismála hjá framkvæmdastjórn Evrópusambandsins hjóla hjón til vinnu og í leikskóla með börn sín.
The first cargo bikes we had were without an electric motor, but with all the hills in Oslo, we soon realized that we had to make a change.
Þar lýsir konan því hve miklu hraðar og ódýrar þeir komast leiðar sinnar á hjóli en á bíl. Fyrstu hjólin þeirra hafi ekki verið rafknúin en þar sem Osló sé hæðótt hafi þau hjónin fljótt komið að því að betra væri að vera á rafknúnum hjólum. Borgaryfirvöld hafi stutt almenning til að kaupa sér rafhjól og á hverjum degi fjölgi þeim sem fari leiðar sinnar á slíkum hjólum. Osló var valin úr hópi 14 borga sem tilnefndar voru til titilsins European Green Capital eða græn höfuðborg Evrópu 2019. Borgir þurfa að vera með yfir 100.000 íbúa til að geta komið til greina og þær borgir sem hreppt hafa titilinn hafa sýnt fram á að þær hafi uppfyllt ákveðin umhverfisviðmið. Þær eru ákveðnar í að halda áfram að markmiðum sínum sjálfbæra þróun og að því að bæta umhverfið og þykja til þess bærar að vera öðrum evrópskum borgum fyrirmyndir í þessum efnum. Í kynningunni sem vísað í hér að framan kemur einnig fram að árangur hafi náðst í vinnslu á eldsneyti og sorpi sem flokkað í borginni. Ef framheldur sem horfi takist innan fárra ára að endurnýta allt koltvíóxíð sem fellur til og flytja þá þekkingu út til annarra ríkja til hagsbóta fyrir umhverfið.
If everything works out the way we hope, we will in a few years manage to salvage all carbon dioxide.
Titillinn Græn borg Evrópu hefur verið veittur árlega frá 2010 þegar hann kom í hlut Stokkólms í Svíþjóð. Osló verður þriðja höfuðborgin á Norðurlöndunum sem hampað með þessum hætti því Kaupmannahöfn var fyrir valinu 2014. Einhverjum gæti þótt skjóta skökku við að Osló sé valin umhverfishöfuðborg Evrópu enda fellur Noregur í hóp þeirra ríkja sem mest flytja út af jarðefnaeldsneyti, að minnstakosti miðað við höfðatölu. Mest af olíunni kemur úr borunum í Norðursjó en gæti í auknum mæli komið úr Barentshafi eftir að stjórnvöld opnuðu stórt vinnslusvæði þar í fyrra. Hráolía og jarðgas helmingurinn af útflutningi Noregs og 6% fólks á vinnumarkaði starfa í olíuiðnaði landsins með beinum eða óbeinum hætti. Þá nemur fjárfesting norska olíusjóðsins í jarðefnaeldsneytisgeiranum erlendis rúmum 6%. Borgaryfirvöld í Osló vonast til að aðgerðir þeirra verði til þess að bæta loftgæði í borginni, hvetja til meiri menningarstarfsemi og draga úr losun gróðurhúsalofttegunda. Borgin stefnir að því að árið 2020 hafi tekist að draga úr losun 50% miðað við árið 1990 og að borgin verði orðin kolefnishlutlaus árið 2050. Foreign Policy hefur eftir Peter Eriksson, vísindamanni hjá umhverfisstofnun Stokkólms, að í Parísarsáttmálanum sé eingöngu litið til þess hversu mikið ríkjum takist að draga úr losun innan eigin landamæra. Í Noregi komi aðeins 5% af losun frá olíu og jarðgasi úr framleiðslu. Afgangurinn eigi sér stað utan Noregs. Foreign Policy vísar í fullyrðingar framkvæmdastjórnar olíusjóðsins að Noregur haldi rétt á spilunum. Vinnsla og jarðefnaeldsneyti sé svo hreinasta á alþjóðamarkaði. Þó verið á það að olíuvinnslusvæði í Sádi-Arabíu hafi náð betri árangri í að draga úr losun. Þá sýna rannsóknir að losun gróðurlofttegunda í Noregi hefur staðið í stað þrátt fyrir að vinnsla á olíu og jarðgasi hefur dregist saman. Norsk heimili og fyrirtæki nota nær eingöngu raforku frá vatnsaflsvirkjunum og hlutfallið 95%. Nýjar byggingar stærri en 500 fermetrar þurfa að fá 60% raforkunar frá endurnýjanlegum orkugjöfum. Í Noregi fá eigendur rafmagnsbíla afslátt af bílastæðagjöldum, tollum og fleira. Allt þetta gerir Noregi kleift að skipa sér í flokk heimsins grænustu landa. Sjálfbærni hefur verið rauði þráðurinn í uppbyggingu og byggingaframkvæmdum í Osló undanfarin ár, segja borgaryfirvöld. Í nýjum hverfum og annarri uppbyggingu áhersla lögð á umhverfisvænar lausnir eins og jarðhita, sólarrafhlöður og endurvinnslu. Þá hefur þess verið gætt að náttúra og dýralíf í borginni njóti verndar og að mannvirki sem hægt hefur verið að nota fái nýtt hlutverk. Stór græn svæði má finna í norskum borgum og sérakreinar fyrir hjól. Þá hefur verið ákveðið að miðborg Oslóar verði bíllaus fyrir árið 2019. Áform borgaryfirvalda fela í sér að 700 bílastæði verði lögð af og akbrautum breytt í göngustíga. Lokað var fyrir almenna umferð bíla 1. júní á 2 ferkílómetra stóru svæði í miðborginni. Þar búa 5.500 manns og 120.000 manns starfa þar. Eina bílaumferðin sem má sjá þar umferð leigubíla, sjúkrabíla og bíla sem aka fólki með fötlun. Jarle Åbo, sem hefur verið í forsvari fyrir þá sem á móti því að miðborginni verði lokað fyrir umferð, segir að það sorglegasta við stríðið gegn einkabílnum séu árásir stjórnmálamanna á einstaklingsfrelsið og peningaveski fólks.
Det som det store dramaet i krigen mot bilen at politikerne angriper folks frihet og folks lommebok.
Þá segist hann efast að hjólreiðamenn eigi eftir að fylgjast kátir með götulistamönnum í janúar í 20 stiga frosti á kafi í snjó. Hanna Markusen, borgarfulltrúi græningja í Oslo, segir að ætlunin sé að skila borginni aftur til fólksins, svo börn geti leikið sér vörug og gamla fólkið hafi bekki til að tylla sér á.
Hensikten med bilfritt byliv å gi bysentrum.
Hann segir í samtali við AFP að salan hafi gengið vel fram til 1. júní en eftir það hófst varla nokkur hræða inn í bílinn. 2 öðrum verslunum í næsta nágrenni hafi nýlega verið lokað og neytendur hafi snúið viðskiptum sínum í auknum mæli til verslunarmiðstöðva í útjaðri borgarinnar. Veitingastaðir, kaffihús og barir kunni að njóta góðs af bíllausri miðborg en ekki sérverslanir. Hanna Markusen hins vegar sannfærð að borginni eigi eftir að aðlagast nýrri ásýnd því það sé í miðborgum sem hægt sé að blanda saman verslunarferðum, menningarviðburðum og veitingastöðum. Tíminn verður síðan að leiða í ljós hvernig það gengur.
Ásrún Brynja Ingvarsdóttir tók saman. Það var meðal efnis í Speglinum í kvöld að mál þar sem tekist á hæfi 4 dómara við Landsrétt fær flýtimeðferð hjá Mannréttindadómstól Evrópu. Ný forysta hefur tekið við stjórn Alþýðusambandsins. Fyrsti varaforseti segir að fyrir horfur
and you're headed for an ugly place. And so we've entered a spot where we've got these Manichaean distinctions, and then we've also got people catastrophizing. If the other side wins, then the country's off to ruin. Neither of those things are true.
And Mark, I mean, again, we don't want to make more of this than what we know, but there does seem to be this seems to be a moment of particular vitriol out on the campaign trail. To some extent, it's the way the president has talked about this caravan of people coming up through Mexico, migrants from Central America, and there have been other steps that Republican politicians and Democratic politicians have taken to stir people up. I mean, are there any guardrails right now?
Well, Judy, the terrible part about our politics is that the dominant rule is if it works, emulate or try to simulate it. And I think right now I'm in Ohio, and I think the Senate race is a perfect example of that. Jim Renacci, the congressman, won the Republican nomination by almost behaving like a mini Trump. But he's going to be beaten quite badly by Senator Sherrod Brown because there's only one Trump. I mean, Donald Trump has been doing this for 25 years. He's practiced at it, but make no mistake about it, there'll be knockoff Trumps. There'll be people trying to do it. There'll be Democrats trying to say this is the way to do it, and it does work until it doesn't work. And I think it's not working, quite frankly, when the president refuses to accept the responsibility Ronald Reagan laid down, that Bill Clinton did after Oklahoma City, that George W. Bush did in the wreckage of 9/11 with the first responders, that to heal a nation and to reach out to the other side, to offer an arm around the shoulder rather than pointing a finger of blame.
And David, I mean, whether it's a negative or a positive, I mean, we have polling results that remind us again how much President Trump is a factor in these elections. We look back, this was the NewsHour NPR Marist poll. We look back at how much people said President Obama was a factor in 2014. 28% said he was a major factor compared to 44% for President Trump today. We're in a different time.
Yeah, and those numbers are low. You know, people don't want to admit they're actually voting on the president when in fact they are. And so I'd say it's 80% is really who Trump is. And he represents a fundamental shift in what how the country sees itself. how we see our foreign policy, how we see our identity. He's a very talented cultural poker. And so a lot of identity issues, a lot of cultural issues are poked by the way he talks about the caravan, the way he talks about men, the way he talks about women, the way he talks about race. And so he's presented really a fundamental challenge for taking over the Republican Party, and a challenge to the way either party has defined the country and defined themselves and defined morality, basically. And so he's sort of this revolutionary force. And so it's not surprising the election would really revolve around him. I think it's a mistake personally that the Democrats are countering him by running on health care, on pre-existing conditions and some of the Obamacare benefits. I think the Democrats constantly make the mistake where they say we can win elections by offering people material benefits, and then they don't understand why they lose the working class, because they say, you know, what's the matter with Kansas? We offered these people these benefits and they didn't vote for us. It's because most people vote on culture and identity, not on material benefits. So when the Democrats go to materialism and Donald Trump is doing culture, I think it's playing more into hands because there's no response.
Mark, what do you make of the way Democrats are responding to the president?
Let me respectfully disagree and tell David to keep his eye on Kansas in 2018, because he may have a new theory after November 6th. I really do think the Democrats have shown remarkable discipline by not chasing down rabbit. Democrats, I think, have shown a characteristic discipline by staying on health care. Republicans ran on repeal and replace. They tried very hard to repeal. They had no replace. And now, as Americans are aware of pre-existing conditions and what it means to cover people who do have a pre-existing condition, insurance company, all of a sudden, Republicans are coming up all over the board across the country with individual stories, how they had a child or a nephew or a brother or sister who was sick, and they've never revealed this. So I really think, quite to the contrary, I think the Democrats have shown uncharacteristic discipline, and Trump has been all over. There's been no theme to this Republican pudding.
So he disagrees with you.
Astonishing. Listen, I'm not going to say it's going to be a Republican year. I'm not saying that. But I do think people tend to vote on values, and I do think identity issues. And so what we've seen is in the areas where, frankly, Trump is culturally repulsive, the Democrats are doing very well. But to me, the Democrats had a historic opportunity to win over a lot of centrist places, make some inroads in some Senate seats. And so to me, this is a Democratic field, and that's likely to be a little more 50-50.
Well, speaking of tax cuts, I'm going to share with all of you, this is a look at the New Jersey Senate race. They had a debate this week. Our own Lisa Desjardins was one of the moderators. She helped moderate it. Here's an example of the exchange between the incumbent Senator Bob Menendez and his Republican challenger. Let's listen.
New Jersey is so overtaxed. I go all around this state. I don't meet one person that says taxes are too low in New Jersey. Everyone says it's overtaxed. And when you pay your tax bill, remember, Senator Menendez has voted for over 500 tax increases in his tenure, including increasing taxes on your Social Security check.
What we shouldn't have is a $2 trillion tax bill that my opponent supports, and that he helped the person who drove the tax bill be in office, the President of the United States, Donald Trump. And now that they have $2 trillion unpaid for, what's the Republican leader of the Senate say? As soon as this election is over, we have to go after entitlements, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security.
As you see, Bob Hugin, Mr. Hugin, who is the Republican candidate challenging Bob Menendez. Mark, they did come back to taxes. It's one of the things, David was just saying is not terribly effective, going to be terribly effective for Democrats this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the New Jersey race, I think, has to be understood that Bob Menendez, the Democrat, in a state, when Democrats talk about winning back the House, the three cornerstone to that strategy are California, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, where the Democrats, I'd add to it today, Iowa possibly, but I mean, those are the states where the Democrats are going to pick up the majority of their seats. So the fact that the race is close is a reflection more than anything else on not simply the Republican challenger's campaign, where he's been very deep-pocketed and run a very strong campaign, but Bob Menendez is the hung jury on his...
It's much more, what do we think about immigration. But we think about Trump and the global populace around the world have really changed the terms of debate, and what we just heard there could have been said anytime in the last 30 or 40 years.
Mark, I mean, the point is, he's changing basically the political polls. Mark, I mean P-O-L-E, not poll.
Yeah, no question, Judy. In 2012, when Mitt Romney was the Republican nominee, there was a widespread consensus of immigration as an issue. The Republicans were essentially, the Republican position was that they were for more liberalized immigration, perhaps the Democrats were, who were concerned about immigrants representing threats on hourly jobs. But at the same time, only 4% considered a top issue. This is now Donald Trump's party. 23% of Republicans now consider this the top issue in 2018. That is Donald Trump's party. That isn't the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan, party of George H.W. Bush, the Republican. So David's right. There is a change in Donald holds senators who happen to be standing. But this is written, produced, and directed. This administration, this government by Donald Trump.
We come back to that central point, David.
Yeah, and you see how he goes back to the caravan again and again, an issue like made to order for him. To me, it's an exaggeration. I mean, we've had refugees come to this country before. We haven't had a national crisis over it. We haven't had to send down the National Guard. We way to process these things. We're a country of 330 million people. We can handle if it's 2,000, and if they really are refugees who need protection, we can handle it. But that's not how it's being played out. It's some barbarian, and so that's the issue for me.
And on that note, we're going to thank you both, David Brooks, Mark Shields. Thank you.
Thank you.
This message comes from
Hello and welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World, coming to you live from London. I'm Julian Marshall. Today, a fresh attempt to find a solution to the conflict in Syria. The French, German, Russian and Turkish leaders meet in Istanbul. We'll have the latest. Also, we'll hear from Sri Lanka, where the president has sacked the prime minister and suspended parliament. And on the eve of a vice presidential election in Brazil, we hear from opponents and supporters of the far-right favourite, Jair Bolsonaro.
If it's necessary, we are going to get in arms to defend our country. We don't want the communism. We are trying with the democratic way, but if don't, we never, Bolsonaro is the solution.
That report in full and about to go first to the Turkish city of Istanbul, where yet another attempt is being made to end the conflict in Syria and find a lasting political solution. It's a conflict which is now approaching its 8th year and which has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. And even though the government in Damascus, with the backing of its allies, Russia and Iran, is now close to military victory, fighting continues with no sign of a long-term political settlement which would encourage the return of refugees. The summit in Istanbul brings together the leaders of Turkey, which supports the rebels, Russia, Germany, France is in Istanbul.
Up in a restored mansion up on the hills above the Bosphorus on the Asian side. And I think, what's interesting about this meeting is its composition. The fact that this is not just Turkey and Russia, who've met, of course, many times in the past to talk about Syria, but also European leaders taking part for the first time. I think there's multiple reasons for that. Partly Turkey trying to expand this relationship beyond just being with Russia. But I think for Russia, it's about looking, as it likes to do, beyond the conflict future there into the refugee situation and also reconstruction, because I think Russia tries to talk an awful lot about the normalization of the situation in Syria, trying to move beyond the conflict, as I say, towards the peace process, and knowing very much that there's going to be a need for a huge amount of cash one day in Syria, and that's going to have to come in large part from Europe. So I think there's a lot to discuss. Obviously the situation in Idlib and the ceasefire there, but also I think very practical things like where the money is going to come from to stabilise the situation in Syria itself. It's interesting, they're all sides really playing down. Spoke to people from the French presidency and also from the Kremlin, since any break comparing sides. I think an awful lot to talk about, but no one's expecting any major shattering statements to come out of it. But I think it's seen by all sides as important. And I think, I just mentioned Idlib. Don't forget it's just over a month since Turkey and Russia brokered a deal there for a demilitarized zone around Idlib. And that was just at a time when, everyone was talking about potential humanitarian catastrophe and another outflow of refugees from Idlib, as we were expecting another government forces assault on the last rebel stronghold there. So that hasn't happened, and I think Russia has been keen to point to that as proof that it wants to move beyond the violence that it has been backing Bashar al-Assad for a very long time there, but there is a broad desire now to take this situation to another phase.
But this is, if you like, a separate strand of negotiations, because there are so many, aren't there, with Syria at the moment. We've got Astana, we've got Sochi, and of course the UN-sponsored efforts in Geneva.
That's right, and I think it's all a bit confusing, isn't it? But I mean, there's the UN-backed peace process from Geneva, which essentially has stalled. We just heard over the past couple of days from Stefan de Mistura, the UN envoy, who of course are overseeing that process, and he's saying that Syrian government representatives are basically there for constitutional stage of a political process for Syria, and at the moment that has just headed into deadlock. So because the Syrians are essentially stalling the entire process. So that's the process which Russia has been backing. That's about the military side of things. We've had talks in Sochi. There's an awful lot of talks that involve Iran. We're expecting another set of those in a couple of weeks. And now 2 European leaders involved. I think it just reflects the fact that this is a conflict in which there are many interests and many visions on how it moves forward.
That was the BBC's Sarah Rainsford speaking from Istanbul, underway on the future of Syria, involving the leaders of Germany, France, Russia and Turkey. And I've also been speaking to Alexei Khlebnikov, Middle East North Africa expert at the Russian International Affairs Council, Michel Duclos, former French ambassador to Syria. Do France and Germany, I asked him, have common goals?
Humanitarian assistance to populations and, if possible, to stimulate the...
Mr. Khlebnikov.
I won't completely agree with my colleague. I would say that France and Germany, they have quite different priorities within the Syrian conflict. Why is that? Firstly, because they don't have presence on the ground.
But we have some forces in the northeast of Syria, and also it's difficult to imagine a political settlement without the contribution of the Security Council of the UN and without Europe.
Mr. Khlebnikov, can this summit, this meeting, make any kind of progress with the absence of the United States and perhaps indeed with the absence of Iran, President Assad's other principal backer?
Well, it's quite a question, and in the first place, yes, absence of both US and Iran is quite significant, because without these two players, it's quite problematic to move forward with any of the issue. But as far as I understand, the major goal of this meeting basically to move forward with political process and problem of refugees. The issue Moscow and tries to push forward, and judging by the actors which is involved in this process, so basically it's Germany, France, and Turkey, we can say that they are the countries who are mostly affected by the refugee crisis. So Turkey hosts the majority of Syrian refugees. It's over 2 million. And the same is true with Germany, which also is the larger acceptant of refugees within the European Union. So I think that's exactly the agenda which Moscow tries to push and actually try to play with to achieve its goals. Because for Moscow currently, the major priority is to move forward with the return of the refugees.
But can you imagine, or can you understand, Mr. Khlebnikov, why many of those refugees might be reluctant to return? Many of them opponents of the government, and an absence of any kind of security guarantees.
Yes, exactly. You're covered right. One of the major concerns on how the refugees coming back is the guarantee. And Moscow actually pushes the idea that Moscow should guarantee the safe return of the refugees, and basically not to try to prosecute or push that environment which basically make refugees not to come back.
Mr. Duclos, where does France and Germany stand on the issue of refugees returning? Both countries, of course, hosting significant numbers of Syrian refugees.
We have a big interest, of course, in having as many refugees as possible coming back to their native country. For that, conditions are to be met. Among those conditions, safety and security, and also some kind of reconstruction and economic background. But this as long as is Damascus holding some kind of power. Of course, we are not in a position to say Assad must go and things like that. The leaders of the West used to say a few years ago. But in terms of political process, it has to start, of course.
So do I take it from what you are saying that they reconcile to President Assad remaining in Syria?
No, I said exactly the opposite.
Well, I think you said that you'd like him to go, but you realised that you weren't really in a position to align.
No, he won't go simply by other countries. We need him to go, but for that we have to create a consensus and a political process to create the conditions for him to go.
Mr. Khlebnikov, the Russians presumably see it differently. They have a loyal ally in President Assad and would like him to remain as head of state in the future.
It doesn't, but it's not time to the time which goes. We're to find a common ground with its European and US partners to move forward, because it's quite clear that without the United States and European involvement, it would be almost impossible to resolve the entire issue in Syria.
That was Alexei Kolesnikov, Middle East North Africa expert at the Russian International Affairs Council. We also heard from Michel Duclos, former French ambassador to Syria and now advisor to the Institut Montaigne, a French think tank. Listening to the BBC World Service, this is NewsHour. The murder of the Saudi dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul remains above all a human tragedy.
Jamal Khashoggi in a diplomatic facility must concern us all greatly. Failure of any one nation to adhere to international norms and the rule of law undermines regional stability at a time when it is needed most. As President Trump noted, we're going to get to the bottom of it.
Prime Minister Adel Al-Jubeir, who was the first Saudi to show public knowledge that Mr. Khashoggi had been murdered, accused the media of rushing to judgment of the murder.
We have Saudi law enforcement people working with our Turkish friends to uncover the facts. This issue has become fairly hysterical. People have assigned blame on Saudi Arabia before the investigation is complete. It's clear that we are going to have a full and transparent investigation, the results of which will be released.
Let's speak to our security correspondent, Frank Gardner, who's in Bahrain. And Frank, is there still a divergence in the attitude of the United States and Saudi Arabia to this murder?
Yes, there is, although I think there are great efforts being made to try and help the Saudis out of this hole that they've got themselves into. The Saudi government did not help themselves at all by going into almost a reflex action of denial in the first 2 weeks of saying it's nothing to do with us, he left the consulate, not our problem. When actually, of course, he didn't leave the consulate, he was murdered in there. And they've been accused of half-truths and cover-ups and so on. What Saudis are telling me privately here is they think that this was carried out by utterly incompetent people, buffoons, somebody called them, from close to the Crown Prince, but without necessarily his knowledge. The trouble is, you can't have it both ways. Either he knew about it, in which case his hands are soiled, or he didn't, in which case he really was not in control of those closest to him.
And that reference by the US Defense Secretary James Mattis to the murder being a threat to regional, was that a reference to the anti-Iran alliance, of which, of course, Saudi Arabia is a major part?
Any weakening of the strategic could potentially we should cut back on ties with the Saudi state. So this is a real crisis. It's probably the biggest crisis in US-Saudi relations since 9/11.
And very briefly, so spoke of the need to bring an end to the war in Yemen. Did he elaborate?
Yes, he did. He criticised Iran for arming the Houthis and for the Houthi missile attacks, but he said the time has come to end this war. And those words will not be lost on people in Riyadh, because Riyadh depends entirely for its air campaign on the military support and intelligence support coming from the United States, and to a less extent from Britain. The casualties, the civilian casualties caused by these airstrikes are horrendous, and everyone wants it to stop.
Frank, many thanks. That was our security correspondent, Frank Gardner, speaking there from Bahrain. Brazilians vote for a new president on Sunday in the second round of elections. The front-runner is far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro, whose comments about race and same-sex relations heavily criticised his opponents. Kasatsa reports from the northeastern state of Pernambuco.
Bolsonaro supporters are counting down the days till victory, hoping he'll make Brazil great. I've victory families who support the far right around town, loudspeakers in the back of their cars, and Brazilian flags.
I know family. I know of we community here. We are trying with the democratic way, but if not, we never will be like the Venezuela.
With several thousand people.
Dictated with democracy.
He says
Mrs. was still to come forward, but she knew that it had affected her career, that she had rebuffed him. But I couldn't override her and speak.
Jane Fonda, who was here in London to launch the British Film Institute's Comedy Genius season. You're listening to NewsHour from the BBC. I'm Julian Marshall. Critics of Sri Lanka's president, Maithripala Sirisena, are calling it a coup. His decision to sack the Prime Minister, Ranil Wickremesinghe, suspend Parliament and replace him with one of Sri Lanka's most controversial political figures, Mahinda Rajapaksa. Mr. Wickremesinghe is refusing comment of him. Many Sri Lankans are also alarmed at the return to political power of Mr. Rajapaksa, who, while president, was accused as the Colombo Bureau.
There's been tension between the two for some time, and recently the president did express a desire to seek a second term. Now, that would immediately put him head along with the prime minister, who also has presidential ambitions. So potentially, the president and the prime minister would have contested against each other at the presidential election. So in the run-up to the presidential election, it was bound to lead to a lot of friction, and what we saw was that conflict kind of reaching peak with the president sacking the prime minister. In office, so he is maintaining that, and he is made it very clear in Parliament. He will prove his majority on the floor of the House. Of course, the suspended Parliament for all Wickremesinghe will not have majority, which court to sort
has the man who the president